Okay, I'm back. Moving along, trying to get caught up here. I just posted the sixth video that covers the conversation between Socrates and Adeimantus. Adeimantus presenting his theory or his view on justice and injustice. And as you know, it focuses largely on this problem known as the problem of suffering or the problem of evil, right? Why do bad things happen to good people? If there is truly a God in existence and this God is all good and all powerful, how can justice or how can suffering and evil exist in a world run by an all good, all powerful God? That's the problem. Why should I be just in an unjust world? Right? Okay. We are now ready for Socrates' response. As I said at the end of the last video, what Thrasymachus says, what Glaucon says at the beginning of Book 2, what Adeimantus says right after that, these are the problems that the rest of the book is trying to solve or respond to. And that's what Socrates is doing here. How does he initially respond? He says, justice is too hard, justice and injustice are too hard to see in the individual heart of a person, in the individual soul. It's hard to read an individual, right? We don't know the inner thoughts and the inner desires of people. Oftentimes, we can't even completely see into our own selves, correct? As a result, Socrates says, I think we need to make the picture bigger. We need to blow the picture up, right? And so let's build a city from scratch in our minds, in our thoughts. We're going to build a city from scratch and see if we can see justice there. Okay? Well, how does he go about this? By finding out what crafts we initially need in our city. By realizing that no one lives on their own, generally. We are all dependent on lots of other people for our daily well-being, right? We're all in need of a number of things. Food, water, shelter, clothing, all of those kinds of basics, right? And so that leads us to try and figure out what crafts are going to be included in our city. What crafts do we need, right? And one thing we notice right off the bat, too, that Socrates says, let me find this real quickly. Where Socrates says on pages 47, 48, he says this in more than one place. It's better, and I think 49 as well. He either implies or states that it's going to be best for our city if everyone focuses on just one craft, right? One man, one craft per person. That way we can focus, get good at our craft, and devote all of our time and energy to that. And whatever excess work we have or product we have, right, we can give to the rest of the city, right? What are the first crafts that we're going to need? Well, we need food. So we're going to need farmers, right? And later on, we're going to add herdsmen because we're going to have herds for meat, right? And of course, the herds, cattle, sheep, things like that, will provide materials for clothing, as well as food, as well as a possible labor force. As you know, animals back then pulled plows and things like that, right? So we're going to need horses, oxen, cattle, sheep, goats, things like that. And so we're going to need people to herd and raise such animals, right? We're going to need farmers. We're going to need clothes makers. We're going to need shoemakers. We're going to need tool makers so that farmers and clothing makers and people like that don't have to make their own tools. So we'll have tool makers, metal workers, crafts of that sort, right? Um, we'll have a few doctors, we're told. He doesn't use the word doctor, um, but at the very bottom of page 47, it's mentioned that we're going to need someone to take care of our bodily needs. That sounds like a doctor to me, right? Someone to care for us if we break a leg or hurt ourselves or get sick. Someone who can care for us in that manner, right? So that'll be a need. We'll need house builders, people to build shelters, right? Carpenters, people of that sort. Um, we're not going to have, if I'm a farmer and I raise a bunch of excess wheat or whatever it is I grow, if I raise a bunch of excess crops, I'm not going to have time to go into the city and sell my goods. I'm going to give it to someone known as a merchant who can do that for me, right? So we're going to have merchants within town to help trade within our city. And then we're going to have other special merchants to go trade with other cities. Because just as, and this is very important now, just as Socrates says, no single person is self-sufficient. That's why we come together in cities in the first place. That's a very important principle. I forgot to say that at the beginning here. Just as none of us is self-sufficient, right? No city is self-sufficient either, so we're going to have to trade with other cities, some of them perhaps fairly far away. So we'll have merchants travel to other cities. And that may involve traveling by ship as well. Greece was right there on the Mediterranean Sea, as you know, and so they traded a lot by boat, by ship. So we're going to need shipbuilders, and we're going to need captains of those ships, and navigators of those ships, and sailors of those ships. Those are all extra crafts we're going to need for our city. We're going to need laborers just to do help with a lot of the heavy work, right? Tradesmen, merchants, and so on, right? Okay. So, two of the basic principles of our city: no one is self-sufficient. That's why we're coming together and working together in the first place, right? So we will give to the city our goods and services and skills for what others need, and they will give back to us, right, for what we need. No one is self-sufficient. And likewise, everyone's going to focus on just one craft, so that they can get good at it and focus on it, right? And we all do better when we're allowed to focus as opposed to trying to do everything ourselves, right? So no one is self-sufficient, and one person, one craft. Those are two of the rules of our city. Well, we get to the bottom of page 50, right? And Socrates asks the question, has our city now grown to completeness? Adimantus says, well, maybe. Socrates says, then, where are justice and injustice to be found in our city? This is the bottom of page 50. With which of the people we considered did they come in? With which of the people we considered did they come in? Adimantus goes, I don't know, Socrates, unless it is somewhere in some need that these people have of one another. This is kind of puzzling. We've been building our city for several pages here. We've established all of the crafts it's going to need, and yet the craft of justice doesn't seem to fit anywhere, right? Unless, of course, justice is not a craft knowledge or something different, right? It's a different kind of knowledge, maybe. What kind of knowledge is justice, right? That's important. Well, Socrates says, let's sort of lay out a picture of their way of life. This is the picture of the city's culture. You know this word, right, in English? Culture. C-U-L-T-U-R-E. Culture. Let's lay out the city's culture. And at the bottom of page 50 and to the top of page 51, Socrates, in a single paragraph, describes the culture of the city, right? Very good. Well, how does he describe it? Let's just read it. Socrates says at the bottom of page 50, let's look into this and not back off. First, let's see what sort of life people will lead who have been provided for in this way. What will they do? They will make food, wine. Notice there's wine. So we're going to have winemakers, wine growers, clothes and shoes, won't they? And they will build themselves houses. In the summer, they will mostly work naked and barefoot, but in the winter, they will wear adequate clothing and shoes. For nourishment, they will provide themselves with barley meal and wheat flour, which they will knead and bake into noble cakes and loaves and serve up on a reed or on clean leaves. They will recline on couches strewn with yew and myrtle and feast with their children, drink their wine, and crowned with wreaths, hymn the gods, sing hymns to the gods. They will enjoy talking. Now, I want to stop for just a moment. The translation's a little weak here. It's a little inaccurate. The actual Greek, which I happen to know, actually says they will enjoy having sweet intercourse with one another. Meaning, yes, couples who are married will have sex with one another. Obviously, we will need to procreate in our city and have children. Otherwise, the city will die, right? But we will also talk with one another. I don't know if you know this, but in English, the word intercourse can mean both sex and talking, believe it or not. Having a conversation. And that's what the text actually means here. We will have deep intercourse with one another, sweet intercourse. We're going to talk with each other a lot. When our day is over and we've worked hard, we're going to get together over a good meal and talk. That sounds like a good thing to me. And they will produce no more children than their resources allow, lest they fall into either poverty or war. So we're going to avoid poverty and war as much as possible. Does that make sense? That's the culture. What do you think about this city so far? I don't know. It seems pretty good to me. Right? Well, what does Glaucon say here? Glaucon interrupts, and remember I told you, every time there's an interruption in the text, something important is happening in the text, okay? Always remember that. Well, Glaucon interrupts and says, it seems, Socrates, that you make your people feast without any relishes. Any really, truly delicious food, right? I think is the meaning there. Look how Socrates responds. Oh, you're right, Glaucon. I'm so sorry, I forgot. We will have relishes. We'll have salt and other herbs and spices maybe, and olives and cheese, and we'll have boiled roots and vegetables, right? We'll have desserts like figs and chickpeas and beans, and we'll have myrtle nuts and acorns, and we'll drink wine in moderation, and so we'll live a life of peace and good health. And when we die, we'll die at a ripe old age because we'll be healthy, and we'll pass on the same sort of good life to our children. I'm sorry I left that out. But there you go. I answered your question. Does Glaucon think Socrates has answered his question? The answer is, of course, no. Look how sarcastic Glaucon gets next. This is a very important part of the text. Glaucon says, if you were founding a city of pigs, Socrates, isn't that just what you would provide to fatten them? What is Glaucon really saying here by being so sarcastic with Socrates? I think what he's saying is that this is a too simplistic of a city, and its diet is way too simple. It's the simple diet fit only for pigs or other animals like that, right? It's not fit for truly civilized human beings. We're going to have lots of baked goods and desserts and fancy snack foods and other kinds of things. Really rich foods. Foods that are truly interesting and delicious, right? I'm talking about true relishes, Socrates, right? Fancy desserts. Now, what do you think that kind of changing the diet that way is going to do to us? Sounds like the diet that Glaucon wants is less healthy, right? He wants lots of sweets and fancy desserts. I don't know if you have had these kinds of foods over there in China, but here in America we have lots of snack foods that are not good for us, like Doritos and Fritos and just stuff that munch on, various kinds of potato chips and things like that. And this is why perhaps America is not a healthy country, right? Because that's what we really desire. Well, it seems to me that that's in fact what Glaucon's being driven by, right? Is his desire. What does he think about the city that Socrates has laid out? I think he sees it as boring, right? Is that how you saw it too? I even kind of see it that way a little bit, I got to admit. It's kind of a boring city. It's pretty simple, right? Yeah. Well, I think this is what's going on here. I think we have two different voices or perspectives in the text here at this point. Socrates versus Glaucon and probably all the other young men he's talking with, right? Because look, actually, before I write something on the board, let's read just a little bit more. Socrates says to Glaucon, "What would you have me then do, Glaucon?" "Well," Glaucon says, "do what everyone else does. Do what is conventional. If people are not to suffer hardship, they should recline on proper couches and other furniture." Notice there's no real furniture except natural furniture in the previous city, right? "We should dine at tables and have relishes and desserts and other fancy foods like people have nowadays." That's what civilization really means, right? Socrates says, "All right, I understand. It isn't merely the origins of a city that we are considering, but a city that is luxurious." Maybe that's good too. Maybe by examining such a city, we might perhaps see how justice and injustice grow up in such cities. Yet the true city, in my view, is the one we have described, the healthy one, as it were. But maybe we should look at a feverish city, the kind of city you want, Glaucon. There's nothing to stop us, right? Maybe the city I want to lay out won't satisfy some people. But we need to add couches, tables, and other furniture. We need to add relishes, desserts, incense, perfumes, cosmetics, prostitutes. A lot of people desire that kind of thing, right? Pastries. And the multifariousness, meaning lots of different kinds of everything. We want lots of diversity in our city, right? Yeah. We want lots of different kinds of things, lots of different desserts, lots of different looks in our cosmetics, right? Maybe lots of tattoos, things of this sort. Now, do we need such things in our city? No. But we're adding them anyway because we want them. We desire them, right? So, yes. So in particular, it seems, Socrates says, the necessities we mentioned first are not enough. We're going to add all these other sorts of things. And so Socrates is drawing a distinction between the two cities now. The first one, if to give it a good name, I think, we're going to call it the city of necessity. Right? This second city, though, that results from Glaucon's interruption is the city of luxury. The exact opposite, right? Here we only have things that we need, and as a result, it's healthy. Here we're going to add things that we desire. And as a result, we are also the city with a fever. We're unhealthy. We've got lots of extra desires running around in our city now, trying to satisfy themselves, right? And going after different things that we don't necessarily need. Which city does Socrates prefer? What's the answer? I'll give you a moment. What's the answer? Yeah, he prefers the first city, the city of necessity. He says that here, doesn't he? But what city do most people prefer? The second city. The second city, right? They want the unhealthy city. Yeah. Which city do you prefer? Start thinking about that. It's interesting, though, Socrates wants the first city. He says it's healthy, right? Whereas the second city, look at what happens to it in the next couple of pages. Look at all the things that get added, right? On pages 52 and 53. All these extra luxuries, right? Cosmetics, lots of entertainment, and so we need entertainers, right? Imitators. We're going to add lots of unhealthy foods and different kinds of chefs to make them, right? And our city is going to grow and grow and grow till we intrude into the territories of others. Now the potential for war exists a lot more in the second city, right? So now what are we going to have to add? A military, an army to protect us, and maybe even to take other people over because we need more land now, right? We're also going to need a lot more doctors. Why? Because we're getting sick more often, right? Because our city is unhealthy, right? Our diet is unhealthy. And psychologically, we're probably going to be less healthy. We're going to have a lot more mental illness as well, right? So now we need military, we need doctors, and what else do we need? We need government. Government. Isn't this interesting? Did you notice in the first city, Socrates does not mention government as a necessary craft to the city? Why do you suppose that is? I want to give you a moment to think about this. This is a really important question that you may want to talk about in your assignment, okay? This is interesting. Why is no government necessary in the first city? Why does Socrates not mention government? I think the answer is this. Because the way Socrates pictures these people in the first city, the city of necessity, these people are self-governed. They govern themselves. And as a result, they are a lot more healthy, and they treat each other a lot better. They're not intruding into others like what seems to be happening in the second city. We're going to need a lot of police in the second city too, don't you think? That'll be part of the government. There's no police in the first city. Now, I don't know, do you think the first city still needs police and government? Or are their desires in more harmony with each other? What do you think? This is very interesting, right? So I think what Glaucon represents here is the voice of desire. The voice of desire. Whereas Socrates represents the voice of reason. So Socrates, I'm abbreviating here, represents the voice of reason. And he wants the city of necessity. Is this making sense? Whereas Glaucon is the voice of desire that interrupts the voice of reason, right? And disrupts everything going on there, right? And he wants the city of luxury. He wants to satisfy all of those extra desires, right? And that changes the whole nature of the city. The city of desire does not grow out of the city of necessity. When it interrupts, it replaces the city of necessity. Well, which city do you think people generally live in? I know over here in America, it's definitely the second one. This is the city we really actually live in, correct? Yeah. So, it seems to me we have another irony here in the text. And I think we've got enough room to put this on here. I think what's going on is this. This is the choice before us now. With the first city, we have a city that is more just, but it's boring because it does not satisfy our desires. It's just, but it's more boring. The second city, on the other hand, is more unjust, but it's much more exciting. It's much more attractive to us because of all of our extra desires that most of us have dwelling within our souls. Does that make sense, everyone? So that seems to be what's going on here. This is part of the problem of justice, right? And so, where does justice and injustice exist here? That's another question. And you may want to try and work with that as you think through and work through your assignments, okay? Did this lecture help, again, illuminate, shed some light on what's going on in the text? I hope so. I hope so. Very good. Well, I'm going to end here, and we've got one more video to go, and then we're all caught up on book 2, okay? The next video is going to cover what sort of ruler, known as the guardian or the guardians, what sort of rulers are we going to need now to govern our city of luxury, our feverish city, so that we can get back to something that's more just? What sort of guardians are we going to need? And how are we going to educate them? So what sort of guardians? How are we going to educate them? And then if you remember, Socrates starts talking about the nature of the stories we tell our guardians, especially with respect to the gods. So that's what the final video in book 2 is going to be about. And I'm going to do that in just a moment here and post it as well, okay? And then we'll be caught up on book 2, okay? Thank you so much. I hope this is all helping. See you soon in the next video.